The chair hit the marble floor before I did. A sharp scrape, then the hollow thud of my body following it. Glasses clinked as laughter spilled like broken champagne. I stayed down for a second, my palms stinging, my dress twisted around my legs. Above me, her voice curled, dripping with that sweet poison she loved to pour in public. Your place is on the floor, girl. My brother's fiancée, Lena, 28, hair sculpted high like a crown she thought she'd already earned. She didn't even bend to help me, just let her words hang. And the room joined her, snickers, whispers, eyes cutting across me like shards. I was 32 years old. My name is Elise, and for the first time in a long while, I wanted to vanish back into the silence I had built for myself. But the silence cracked when I heard someone at the back cough awkwardly, the sound of a guest choking on their own discomfort. I rose slowly, tugging my dress back into place, ignoring the sting in my knees. Every step back to my chair felt like dragging stone. The engagement banners above us fluttered in the air conditioning, cheerful, mocking. My brother, Daniel, shifted in his seat, eyes flickering between Lena and me. He didn't move to help either. That was the part that burned. Not the fall, not even her words, but his silence, his choice to let me sit in humiliation. The lights shimmered against the crystal centerpieces, and for a strange second, the whole party froze in my mind like a photograph. Lena smirking, Daniel quiet, guests sipping wine with rehearsed grins. I thought of how many times I had told myself blood meant loyalty, and how many times it had betrayed me. Then a voice cut through the glassy quiet, deep, deliberate. "Ma'am, is that really you?" Her father, standing near the head table, staring at me with something sharp and unsettled in his gaze. The laughter thinned instantly, the air folding into silence. Every eye shifted from Lena's smile to his stare. I didn't answer. My lips pressed shut. I only tilted my head and held his gaze, because suddenly in that single question, I felt the ground beneath me change. I had thought this night would just be another reminder of where I stood in my family. Instead, it was opening a door I hadn't known was still locked. And doors, once opened, don't close so quietly. Have you ever had family cross your boundaries? Let me know in the comments. I lifted my glass, not to toast, not to smile, just to mark the moment. Somewhere between humiliation and revelation, I realized something. Falls don't always break you. Sometimes they uncover who's been watching. The silence that followed his question was heavier than the laughter had been. You could almost hear forks pausing midair, champagne bubbles fizzing in slow motion. Lena's smile faltered just a fraction, like she wasn't sure whether to keep playing the role of the victorious fiancé or shift into something else entirely. Her father, Mr. Carroway, wasn't the kind of man who asked questions idly. Everyone in the city knew his name, tied to half the real estate along the waterfront. His suits fit like they had been tailored from power itself. His words carried like quiet thunder. And now those eyes, sharp, assessing, were fixed squarely on me. "Elise," I said, finally, my voice calm, like stating my own name was the only shield I had left. Something flickered across his face. Not recognition, not exactly, but curiosity. A weight I couldn't quite name. His glass stayed untouched, his hand steepled as if considering whether the evening had just shifted in his favor. Daniel cleared his throat, forcing out a chuckle. "Dad, it's nothing," Lena was just. But Lena cut in, her voice sugar-dipped. "Just teasing. Elise knows I was joking." She looked straight at me, daring me to contradict her. And for a moment, I considered giving her what she wanted, letting it slide, disappearing into the background like I always had at these gatherings. But then I noticed the motif of the evening. Photographs. Every table centerpiece had disposable cameras. Every few seconds, a flash lit the room. This humiliation had already been captured, frozen. And someday, when the album was opened, it wouldn't be just tonight's laughter. It would be proof of where I was placed. On the floor. So I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I only sipped my drink, slow, and let the silence swell until it pressed against her perfect skin. Mr. Carroway's gaze lingered on me before he finally leaned back. Interesting, he murmured. The word was low, but it carried, like a note of music you couldn't forget even if you wanted to. The chatter resumed, awkward at first, then louder, desperate to drown what had just cracked the surface. Lena fluttered her hands like nothing had happened, leaning into Daniel, stealing a kiss for the photographers. But I stayed still, because in the glass before me, in the mirrored reflection of the chandelier, I saw myself clearer than I had in years. Not invisible, not fragile, just waiting. And what they didn't know, what even I hadn't realized until that moment, was that humiliation doesn't rot in silence. It ferments, it sharpens, and it was already turning into something they would never forget. The music rose again, violin stretching across the ballroom like someone trying too hard to cover a crack in the wall. But the crack was there. I felt it in the way eyes darted toward me when they thought I wasn't looking. I sat perfectly still, one hand resting on the tablecloth, tracing the embroidery like it could anchor me. But inside, my thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. Daniel leaned toward Lena, whispering something that made her laugh too loudly. It wasn't joy, it was performance. A laugh meant to remind the room she still owned the stage. I turned my head slightly, studying the head table where her father sat. He was quiet, barely engaging with the couple, his gaze occasionally lifting to glance at me, then shifting away before anyone noticed. His detachment unsettled her more than anything I could have said. "Elise, darling," my Aunt Clara's voice broke into my thoughts. She leaned across the table, her perfume heavy with roses. "You're so quiet tonight. Don't tell me you're jealous." The words struck like a match. My aunt had always known where to press. Her version of affection was disguised as accusation. Around us, a few cousins chuckled. My cheeks flushed, not with shame, but with the effort of holding back the things I wanted to say. I smiled instead, soft and practiced. Jealous of what? Falling chairs. The table went silent. My aunt blinked. A couple of the cousins looked down at their plates, stifling grins. And just like that, the laughter turned, not at me, but at the absurdity of Lena's cruelty. Her jaw tightened. She gripped her champagne flute too tightly, the crystal ringing against her rings. "You always have such sharp comebacks, Elise. I wonder why no one ever invites you to speak at family dinners." Her words slid out smoothly, but I saw the hairline fracture forming in her composure. And then it happened. The photographer snapped a picture at that exact moment. The flash burst, freezing her clenched jaw and my faint smile forever. I didn't need to win the room with words. The photographs were doing it for me. Every moment, every slip in her mask was being preserved in ink and paper. I took another sip, slow and deliberate, and whispered to myself more than anyone else. Let them keep laughing. Tonight is being written in ways they won't control. The violin swelled. Glasses clinked. A new toast was made. But under the chandelier's harsh light, the balance had shifted. They thought the chair had knocked me down. They didn't realize it had just seated me in the perfect position to watch everything unravel. Dinner was served, and the clatter of silverware filled the hall like a nervous orchestra. Plates of seared salmon, asparagus draped in butter, small towers of potatoes, everything carefully curated for the photographs, for the memory of perfection. But perfection is fragile, and I could see it cracking in the reflections. The mirrored wall along the ballroom stretched the scene in duplicate. Daniel's forced smile, Lena's brittle laugh, my aunt's whispering mouth, cousins leaning close like children at a puppet show. Every gesture magnified, every crack impossible to hide. I cut into my salmon slowly, though I barely tasted it. I was studying Lena, the way her eyes darted to her father, searching for reassurance that she still held the room. But he wasn't giving it. He was watching me again. Finally, he raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice low but steady. The room echoed him, lifting glasses, some with genuine cheer, some with obligation. I raised mine too, but my eyes stayed on him. And for a second, our gazes locked over the rim of crystal. His expression was unreadable, but it wasn't casual. No, this was a man measuring, weighing, remembering. Lena leaned into Daniel with a hissed whisper. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read them on her lips. Why is he looking at her? Daniel shushed her, tried to pull her attention back, but the seed of unease was planted. And like all seeds, it would grow. Halfway through the meal, my cousin Jason, always the one to poke the wound, leaned across the table. So Elise still single? His tone was mocking, eyes shining with the cruelty of a boy who'd never grown up. The laughter that followed was sharp, too loud. Lena's smirk bloomed again. I set my fork down gently, the sound a deliberate pause. Then I tilted my head and asked, Jason, you still unemployed? The laughter cut differently this time. Uneasy, awkward, some even stifled with hands over mouths. His grin collapsed. The photographer's flash caught it all. His stunned face, my calm one. That was when I realized I didn't need to strike. They were striking themselves, leaving scars in front of the camera, while I just had to hold my silence. And still, beneath it all, that single question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. Ma'am, is that really you? The food on my plate blurred as my mind drifted back to the memory I'd tried to bury, the night I walked away from a life I'd thought was mine. I tightened my hand around the stem of the glass. If the truth surfaced tonight, it wouldn't be because I spoke it. It would be because silence once again had done its work. And silence was the sharpest tool I owned. The band shifted into something lighter, violins giving way to brass, as waiters cleared plates and brought out cake. The engagement cake towered on a silver stand, all white frosting and spun sugar roses. The cameras clicked faster now. This was the moment people would remember. I stood at the edge of it all, glass in hand, watching the choreography unfold. Lena adjusted her dress, tilted her chin to the light, practiced her smile like a professional. Daniel kept his arm around her waist, his grin stiff as porcelain. But what the photographs didn't capture was the tension behind her father's gaze. Every time the flash went off, he wasn't looking at them. He was watching me. Elise, my Aunt Clara called again, her voice sticky sweet. Don't you want to stand closer to the couple? For the family shot. I shook my head, lips curving faintly. Some stories look better from the edges. A few relatives chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. Lena's smile sharpened, her hand tightening on Daniel's sleeve. She pulled him closer to the cake, determined to block me out of the frame. But the room betrayed her. Every time she leaned too close, every time her laugh rang a note too high, the unease spread. Guests glanced at me, then back at her, confused. It was subtle, but it was there, doubt blooming like a bruise. The knife was brought out, wrapped in ribbon. They posed with it together, fingers laced, leaning in to slice perfection. Cameras lifted. The flash burned. And then, just as the silver cut through sponge, her father's voice broke the performance. Elise, he said, not loudly, but with the authority of someone who never needed to raise his voice. Do you still wear that perfume? The question slid into the room like a blade. My breath caught. Around us, whispers broke. Perfume? What kind of question was that? Why now? I didn't answer immediately. I just turned my head, meeting his gaze across the crowd. Slowly, I set my glass down, my pulse in my throat. Yes, I said softly. I do. Lena's hand trembled against the knife. Daniel frowned. The guests leaned forward, hungry for an explanation that didn't come. Because how could I explain that the perfume, jasmine and smoke, wasn't just a scent? It was a signature. One tied to a night years ago when identities blurred and fortunes shifted. The cameras flashed again, catching the fracture on Lena's face, the tension in her father's stare, the quiet steadiness in mine. The cake was cut, but the sweetness was gone. And for the first time that night, I felt the room shifting under my feet, not against me, but toward me. The first bite of cake hadn't even touched lips before the murmurs began, a ripple moving from table to table, rising above the clink of forks. Perfume, recognition, questions half-whispered behind manicured hands. Lena tried to reclaim the room, laughing too brightly, dabbing a crumb from Daniel's mouth for the cameras. But her father's stare was a nail in the floorboards, holding everyone still. He pushed back his chair, deliberate, the scrape loud enough to slice through the chatter. "Excuse me," he said to no one and everyone, and then he was walking toward me. My pulse didn't quicken. If anything, it slowed, each beat echoing in my chest like a drum announcing something inevitable. "Elise," he said when he reached me, his voice low enough that only the nearest guests could hear, though they all leaned closer anyway. "How long has it been?" 15 years. The words cracked through the air like a lightning strike. Lena froze. Daniel blinked, confused. My aunt gasped, whispering fiercely to a cousin. I looked up at him, steady. 17. Gasps, sharp and sudden, like glass breaking on tile. The room shifted instantly. Cameras lowered, forks paused midair. Suddenly, it wasn't about the couple anymore. It was about me, about what he knew of me. 17, he repeated, almost to himself. His eyes softened for just a fraction before hardening again. "I never thought I'd see you here." The perfume, the question, the stare, it all folded together. He wasn't speaking to me as Lena's guest, or even as Daniel's sister. He was speaking to me as someone tied to his past, a thread he thought had been cut long ago. And the realization rippled through the crowd. Lena's voice cracked as she tried to laugh it off. "Daddy, you must be mistaken. This is just Daniel's sister." But he didn't even glance at her. No mistake. Silence devoured the room. The cake stood untouched. The music faltered. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. Daniel looked at me then, truly looked. His confusion was raw, a wound splitting open across his face. "Elise, what's going on?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because some truths aren't spoken, they unfold. And in that moment, with every camera frozen, every guest leaning in, I realized the party had stopped being theirs. It had become mine. I picked up my glass again, letting the stem balance lightly in my hand. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just breathed, letting the silence stretch until it pressed on every chest in the room. 17 years. And the past had just pulled up a chair at their engagement. The chandeliers hummed faintly above, the band's music stuttering into silence. All that remained was the weight of his words. 17 years, and the echo of them looping in every guest's mind. Lena's grip on Daniel's arm tightened until her knuckles whitened. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "She's nobody. Just your sister, that's all." But her father didn't even flinch. He leaned closer to me, his voice low but sharp enough to slice through every denial. "You still carry it, don't you? The key." Gasps spread like wildfire. Guests leaned forward, whispering fiercely, "What key? What does he mean?" I set my glass down, slow, deliberate. My hand slipped into the clutch at my side, the leather worn soft with years. When I pulled it open, the air in the room seemed to still. And there it was, a small brass key, tarnished at the edges, looped on a thin chain. I laid it gently on the linen tablecloth, and the silence thickened until it was unbearable. Lena's eyes widened. Her breath hitched, panic skittering across her face like cracks in porcelain. Daniel stared at the key, his voice barely audible. "Elise, what is that?" I lifted my gaze to him. It's the reason she wanted me gone before the wedding. The reason her father recognized me. 17 years ago, this unlocked a door in his house. A door I wasn't supposed to open. The words sank heavy into the room. Some guests gasped. Others clutched at pearls, leaning closer. The story was unfolding, and no one could look away. Mr. Carroway's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. He only glanced at Lena, his expression unreadable, as though calculating whether her mask could survive this moment. The photographer, perhaps out of instinct, snapped a picture, the flash catching the small key glinting in the spotlight, my steady hand beside it, Lena's pale face across the table. I sat back in my chair, calm as stone. You wanted me on the floor, Lena. But the truth was always going to rise higher than your laughter. Daniel turned to her then, his voice cracking. What is she talking about? Lena stammered, words breaking apart before they could form. Her father's silence only deepened the wound. And that was when I realized the revenge I had dreamed of didn't need fire or rage, or even my voice raised above a whisper. All it needed was memory, a key, and silence sharp enough to cut. The hull wasn't watching them celebrate anymore. They were watching them unravel. And tomorrow, when the photographs were developed, the proof would live forever. Not the perfection they tried to stage, but the cracks they could never hide. No one touched the cake again. The forks lay abandoned, champagne going flat in crystal glasses. The entire ballroom had bent toward the small brass key resting on white linen. Daniel's hand shook as he turned to Lena. Tell me this isn't real. Her lips trembled, painted perfection crumbling into raw panic. It's nothing. She's twisting things, making me look. Her father's voice cut her off, final and cold. Enough. The word silenced even the whispers. He stood straighter, his gaze moving from me to Lena, then back. For the first time, the mask of power slipped. There was weariness there, guilt threaded into every line of his face. I thought the past would stay buried, he said. I thought if we locked the door, no one would ever open it again. His eyes flicked to the key, but I underestimated memory. Lena's voice cracked. Daddy, don't. But he didn't look at her. His focus was on me, steady and unflinching. I owe you an apology, Elise, for the silence, for the lies we let harden into walls. You didn't deserve to carry that weight alone. The room held its breath. I didn't answer right away. My hand hovered over the key, the small metal piece that had become both a curse and a shield. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, measured. You left me to be the shadow. You let them believe I was nothing. But shadows learn patience. And patience is sharper than vengeance. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, some nodding, some unable to meet my eyes. Daniel looked between us, his face torn open with confusion and betrayal. Lena, what did you hide from me? She broke then, mascara streaking, the carefully curated fiancé reduced to desperation. It was supposed to be perfect. You weren't supposed to know. But the photographs betrayed her. The cameras had already frozen her panic, his disbelief, her father's reckoning. No stage smile could erase it. I gathered the key, slipping it back into my clutch. Then I stood, my chair sliding quietly against marble. The sound was nothing like the crash at the start of the night. This time, the silence that followed was respect. I turned to the crowd, my voice carrying, but not sharp. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be seen. And with that, I walked toward the exit, the chandelier's light trailing me like a crown I hadn't asked for but had finally earned. Behind me, chaos rippled, questions, demands, broken laughter. But it wasn't mine to carry anymore, because revenge wasn't fire. It was clarity. It was walking away while they stood exposed in the wreckage of their own making. I didn't need to destroy them. The photographs would do that for me.